Alright, so this is lecture 11. Now we were talking about oxides of nitrogen formation in the last class, and just to orient you a little bit, combustion requires, as we know, knowledge of fluid mechanics, heat transfer, mass transfer, thermodynamics, but it also requires chemical kinetics. Now in this course I had to assume that you know enough fluid mechanics, enough heat transfer, and at least some mass transfer, and of course thermodynamics to be able to understand these lectures. But I couldn't assume that you know a great deal of chemical kinetics. So that's why we are spending some time on chemical kinetics. So we are still in the initial stage of the course. We are still learning the fundamentals. We have still not analyzed flames. Okay, so we are still building up basics. So this is lecture 11, and in a few classes from now, in maybe about 3 classes from now, we will be able to actually look at reactors and particular flames. So the chemical kinetics discussion that we had was important because it was building up your fundamentals, and in the process we also learned something about combustion of various kinds of species. So for example, CO oxidation we learned a little bit, and one important aspect of combustion processes is also pollutant formation. So will be discussing nitrogen oxide formation today. So that will help you, that will connect you to actual combustion situations. Plus later part of the lecture today we will start discussing combustion of hydrocarbons, and that we may be able to finish today, or maybe it will go to the next class, we will have to see. But we will start off with nitrogen oxide formation. This is important from fundamentals point of view, but also from the point of view of the fact that in combustion systems you have nitric oxide formation, and that is important from the pollutant perspective. So this is what we were doing in the last class. We said that for fuels which do not contain nitrogen, there are essentially 3 mechanisms which are important. In fact, there is a fourth one also which I will tell you about today. So the first one which we are looking at is called a thermal mechanism, or is also called a Zeldovich mechanism, and you saw the reactions in that yesterday. You are already familiar with those. Let me write those again. So O plus N2 giving you NO plus N, that was the first one. And remember that previously, few classes back, we looked at a single headed arrow looking at only the forward reaction, but we should actually write double headed arrow and indicate that this reaction can go in the backward direction also. So that was the first one, and the second one was NO plus O. You are all familiar with this. So this set is the Zeldovich set. Zeldovich was a Russian scientist. So this contribution was due to Zeldovich. Again, very quickly, we already know about this. N2 has a strong triple bond. So this reaction is not easy. The forward reaction N2 plus O giving you NO plus N is not easy, and we can understand it from another perspective. It has a high activation energy. So this is slow, and then we also saw that after that slow reaction we have N plus O2 giving you NO plus O. That is the other reaction. We did some analysis with this. We saw that ddt of N can be set equal to 0, that is a steady state assumption can be used for N atom, and for nitric oxide production rate, that is ddt of NO, we could actually write an expression involving a global reaction rate constant and the concentrations of N2 and O2. So we had all done that before, but this is the Zeldovich set. Now apart from these two that you see, there is another reaction which goes by the, which together with the Zeldovich mechanism goes by the name of extended Zeldovich mechanism. So these 3 together is extended Zeldovich mechanism. So Zeldovich gave the first 2, but then people added the third reaction also. Together this is extended Zeldovich reaction, and the Zeldovich mechanism is for high temperature combustion for a wide range of equivalence ratio. Zeldovich mechanism for high temperature combustion for a wide range of equivalence ratio. That is why it is also called a thermal mechanism. Now the thermal mechanism means that this mechanism is strong at higher temperatures. You can understand that to some extent, because the first reaction will get triggered only if the temperature is high, so that it can overcome the activation temperature. The activation temperature of the first reaction, first forward reaction is high. So, we need higher temperatures. So, that is why it is called a thermal mechanism, and the rule of thumb is that in a combustion system, if the temperature is lower than 1800 Kelvin, then this mechanism will probably not be very strong. This may not be a dominating mechanism if the temperature is less than 1800 Kelvin. This is what roughly we can say. So, high temperature combustion, wide range of equivalence ratios. This is the Zeldovich mechanism. Now, apart from that, there are other mechanisms, as I said. So, one mechanism is called a Fenimore, or Fenimore is again the name of a researcher, or prompt mechanism. I call this number 3, not number 2. I will tell you about number 2 little later. Number 1 was Zeldovich. So, this Fenimore or prompt mechanism is strongly related to the hydrocarbon combustion process, and this is primarily important for rich combustion. And what are the reactions? Primarily what happens is, if there is some hydrocarbon combustion taking place, then there is some CH available. So, this is some radical. So, CH plus N2 give you HCN plus N, and Cn plus N. This sort of thing happens. After that, this opens up, these two will open up for the reactions. What are those? So, the set that you see here, this set opens up, these 4 open up once those 2 reactions which I just now shown you, once those take place, and this set is important for equivalence ratio less than about 1.2. So, if you are not able to write these equations down right now, it is okay, these are all available in the book. And if the equivalence ratio is more than 1.2, if it is more than 1.2, it actually becomes much more complicated and many more reactions open up. So, the chemistry becomes quite complex. So, what you see at the top of the screen, these first 4 are for equivalence ratio less than about 1.2, and for more than 1.2 there is a complex set of reactions which we are not looking at, again available in the book by Stephen Turns and even in other books, but I think we can eschew that, we need not get into that. Okay, so, this was a Fenimore or prompt mechanism, and I called it number 3 because there is a number 2 also. So, that number 2 is a nitrous oxide intermediate mechanism. So, this goes like this. So, things like this. This is NO and this is NH. This includes all reverse reactions. Okay, so what under what situations is this important? This is for fuel lean, that is phi less than 0.8, low temperature. And also high pressure helps. Okay, I wrote all this, but then we should think about it to the extent possible. So, we are talking about nitric oxide formation reactions, especially for those fuels where there is no nitrogen in the fuel present. If the fuel itself has nitrogen, then there are complicating factors which we are not going into. And for other cases, we have discussed 3 mechanisms, which are the primarily important mechanisms. There is a fourth one also, which I will come to a little later. But these 3 are, first of all, the thermal or Zeldovich mechanism, and then we have this nitrous oxide intermediate mechanism, which you just now saw, and there is a Fenimore mechanism, which is also called a prompt mechanism. Now, let us revise the situation. Let us review the situation. The Zeldovich mechanism is important for high temperature combustion for all ranges of phi. Okay. Why is it important for high temperature combustion? Because unless the temperature is high, this will not work, okay, because the first reaction has high activation energy. All right. And then the Fenimore mechanism is important for, we saw rich combustion. Okay. We saw that few minutes back, rich combustion. Why was it important for rich combustion? Because it has this CH radical coming into picture. CH is coming into picture, right? And if you have rich combustion, then this CH sort of radical is more likely to be present. So, that is why this is connected to, Fenimore mechanism is connected to the hydrocarbon reaction mechanism, and if it is rich, then it is getting enough scope to create stuff like CN or HCN. And then CN or HCN will participate in other reactions and open up mechanisms to form NO. So, this is for rich combustion. Zeldovich mechanism for all equivalence ratios. So, since we understand these two, let us think about the nitrous oxide intermediate mechanism. Why is it for fuel lean and low temperature?
Because if fuel is lean, oxygen will be left over.
Yeah, but why is it important for fuel lean combustion? Why is the nitrous oxide intermediate, N2O is nitrous oxide, why is nitrous oxide intermediate mechanism important for lean combustion? And the Fenimore mechanism is important for rich combustion, and I told you the reason, that you will get more CH, and then that will produce HCN and CN. So, we understand that part of it. But here nitrous oxide intermediate mechanism, why is it important for fuel lean combustion and not for other conditions? Yeah, so that is one, and the second thing is, if it is rich, then it has to compete with the Fenimore mechanism, and it may not work out well for that. In rich situations, the Fenimore mechanism is important. And the other condition that we saw for this nitrous oxide intermediate mechanism is that it is also for low temperature. Why is low temperature important? Competition with Zeldovich. And if you look at the reactions that I have listed, this is a competition with Zeldovich, correct? Why? Yeah, so you have O plus N2 giving you NO plus N in Zeldovich. First one. Here it is O plus N2 plus M giving you N2O plus M. So, these are competing. The only thing extra that you see here is M, but M is available. M can be anything. M is a third body, so it is a collision partner, so to say. So, this is possible. So, this can compete with Zeldovich, but it will not be able to compete with Zeldovich if the temperature is high. If the temperature is low, Zeldovich is weak. So, then this will work. Temperature is low means Zeldovich is weak. So, this will work. Fuel lean, because if it is fuel rich, then it's gets overwhelmed by the Fenimore mechanism. Okay, just one more point. I said that if you have high pressure, then the nitrous oxide intermediate mechanism will actually be strong. Why? So, we understand that if you have lean combustion, low temperature, then nitrous oxide intermediate mechanism will work well. But why high pressure also? Why high pressure can help?
Sir, it's a three-body reaction.
Three body reaction. So, it is a three body reaction. So, it's the rate is dependent on concentration of O multiplied by concentration of N2 multiplied by concentration of M. So, it has a pressure dependence cubed, right, because three concentrations multiplied together. So, there is pressure dependence cubed. So, if we increase pressure, this will start overwhelming the first reaction of the Zeldovich mechanism. Of course, you need temperature issue also, it has to be low temperature, otherwise Zeldovich can still be very strong. Okay. So, this is the overall summary, but as I said, there is a fourth equation also which people have discovered recently. So, the fourth one is called an NNH mechanism. So, this is a newer mechanism, this has been recently included. So, this is called an NNH mechanism. NNH is, I think, dinitrogen monohydride, okay, and N2 plus H gives you NNH plus, and NNH plus O gives you NO plus NH, and especially in systems where you have hydrogen combustion taking place, no hydrocarbon, this has been shown to be important, and also for hydrocarbon fuels where there is large carbon to hydrogen ratios. Okay. So, except for those situations, the other three mechanisms are okay, but if you have hydrogen combustion, for example, it will be good to include this also. Now, in engine conditions, quite often, let us say a lot of you are interested in engines. In engines, the Zeldovich mechanism is quite often important. Okay. In power plants, the fuel itself can have nitrogen, and then other mechanisms will also be important. It is not necessary that Zeldovich is always important. Now, I will show you an engine situation. No, this can be the other direction also. Maybe I should have drawn both. Now, let us see. So, we are talking about engines now. Just very quickly, nitrogen oxide formation in engines. This is a spark ignition engine, and what you see here, say the plot that you see in this situation, the top plot, the two more lower than this. So, the first one shows you pressure and a quantity called x. This is x, this thing is x. So, pressure and x are plotted as a function of crank angle degrees. Spark ignition engine, pressure can be measured, and some of you probably even have experience with this. So, something called a P theta diagram. Okay. So, pressure can be measured. So, that means pressure versus crank angle you have through measurement, and if you make a simple thermodynamic model, you can also calculate x. Now, what is x? X is mass fraction burned. So, that is the mass of the burned gas divided by the mass of the mixture. So, you have the mixture which has entered the space above the piston in an engine, and it has been compressed, then you have given a spark, then combustion is taking place. So, the mass is constant, the mass that you have above the piston is constant, but part of that mass of course is burning. So, you get more and more burnt mass and less unburnt mass. So, we know all that, but maybe I should draw this once more just to help you visualize the situation. So, we can have this spark plug and piston. You have this mixture, you give the spark, you generate a flame, and then that flame keeps propagating. So, we said that behind the flame we have this burnt gas, and ahead of the flame, let us use blue for unburnt. So, this is unburnt, right. So, all this is happening. So, that means the burnt mass is actually increasing with time, something very obvious, but it is also being accompanied by a rise in pressure, because pressure is increasing. Piston is never stationary. Okay. So, is the piston going up or coming down as the flame is propagating? Coming down, isn't it? Because it was up there somewhere when you gave the spark, and then the hot gases got produced, and by that time the piston is already coming down, and the hot gases are also pushing the piston down, generating that power stroke. So, the piston is moving, piston is coming down, and this flame, this of course is the flame, right. This is the flame, this is moving. The flame is moving, there is more and more burnt gases getting produced, the piston is coming down, all sorts of things are happening. This is not a steady situation. I have drawn the flame with this corrugations to essentially indicate that this is a turbulent flame which does not have a smooth surface. It is also not exactly thin, it has some thickness. So, it is not like a line exactly, it is not like a surface, it is not like a line on this piece of paper, and it is not an actual thin surface. So, it has some dimension, even though it is actually thin compared to other dimensions that we can think of, like piston dimensions or even the spark plug dimensions, things like that. So, it is actually thin, but not absolutely like a surface, and it is also corrugated. Okay, coming back to what we were discussing. So, this is just to help you visualize all this in your mind. So, looking at this situation when we are plotting pressure as a function of the crank angle and the burnt mass fraction also as a function of the crank angle. So, pressure of course it starts increasing, somewhere you have given a spark maybe few degrees before the top dead center. The top dead center is at what crank angle? 0. Okay. So, few degrees before that maybe you have given the spark, and then the pressure kept on increasing and it went up, and then it started coming down also after some time towards the end of the combustion process. But this is the mass fraction burnt. So, the mass fraction burnt starts from 0 of course, somewhere here few degrees before the crank angle when you have given in the spark and it has actually started burning, and then more and more mass gets burnt, and then finally it reaches a value of 1. It cannot cross 1, right, it has to be 1.
Sometimes some unburned mixture can be.
Yeah, but that fraction, that value will be so close to 1 that on this plot you will not be able to see. So, it is for all practical purposes is like 1. Okay. So, let us again try to understand another plot like this here. Is this good enough or should I make it bigger? That is all right. Okay. So, it shows the temperature as a function of crank angle. Okay, one more thing, pressure was measured, but X, the burnt mass fraction, was calculated based on a thermodynamic model. And what you have here in this plot is 2 solid lines which correspond to burnt gas temperature, and one dashed line which corresponds to unburnt gas temperature, and these are calculated. If I give you the pressure at some crank angle, it is possible for you to calculate the unburnt temperature. Unburnt temperature, it is possible, no? Because unburnt gas has been compressed to some extent. As a compression, if assuming the compression to be isentropic, you can get the temperature. Similarly, for the burnt gas, with the help of a thermodynamic model, it is possible to calculate the burnt gas temperature. Again, for burnt gas also, it is okay to assume it to be isentropic. So, you can calculate this. So, both these are calculated quantities, and these lines that you see, these are for two values of x. So, x equal to 0 and x equal to 1. Now, x equal to 0 identifies one mass element. So, x equal to 0 is that mass element which burnt first. Okay. What do I mean by first? That when you give the spark, on when the combustion process starts, the first fluid packet to get burnt is identified at x equal to 0, and the last fluid packet to burn is identified as x equal to 1. So, there are other fluid packets which unburnt gas packets which burnt corresponding to other values of x. So, x equal to 0.1, x equal to 0.13, x equal to 0.27, whatever you want to calculate. So, there can be other fluid packets which got burnt and which could have been also plotted here, but of course, that would make things very clumsy on the plot. Now, do we understand x equal to 0 curve that we see? Do we understand that? So, there is a fluid element which burnt somewhere around here, when the, I think the dashed line is probably where the spark is given. Okay. So, it burnt, and that as it burnt, its temperature increased, but is it burning all the way? Like it burnt then, no, it burnt somewhere around here when the spark was given. What I am saying is the x equal to 0 fluid element that burnt early enough, but why is its temperature always increasing like this? I mean, not always, but up to about 20 degree crank angle. Why is its temperature increasing?
The remaining part is getting combusted.
So, the combustion is taking place, plus the packet which got burnt, the fluid packet which got burnt is also getting compressed, because the pressure is increasing. All right, we plotted pressure and the pressure reached a maximum value somewhere like 15 degrees or so. So, pressure is increasing, and somewhere around that till that pressure, the first element also got compressed and its temperature increased. Yeah, I thought that I will still clarify one more issue with you. What do we mean by pressure? We are plotting pressure as a function of theta. In that curve, we are plotting pressure as a function of theta, but which pressure? Yeah, so this has a burnt gas, this has an unburnt gas. So, pressure in the burnt zone or pressure in the unburnt zone, pressure close to piston, pressure away from the piston, what is it? Actually, it does not matter. Okay. So, the pressure here everywhere is close to just one value. One value is sufficient, because this flame which moves is a low speed disturbance, unless it is a very high speed disturbance comparable to the speed of sound. This pressure is expected to be uniform. Uniform, what do I mean by that? By uniform, I mean that spatially from one place to the other, pressure is the same. So, I am using the word uniform. So, pressure is uniform at a given theta. Uniform means spatially, with space from one point to another. Is pressure the same with time? Of course not. But at any theta that you can think of, spatially it is homogeneous. It is the same pressure that you will pick up at different places. Okay. So, we do these experiments, combustion experiments in the spherical vessel in our fuels and pollution lab, and there we have again similar sort of situation. This is a large vessel, we fill it up with fuel air mixture, we give a spark, and then there is a flame which propagates to this, similar to this situation, but that flame is laminar. It is not like a violent turbulent flame that we see in engines. It is a smoother flame, but there also we assume the pressure to be uniform everywhere, and that is a good assumption because the disturbance due to the flame is really not very large. Okay, so that is what I mean by pressure. So, I thought I should clarify that also. Now, coming back to what we were doing, coming back to temperature as a function of Planck angle for the first element and for the last element. So, the first element temperature is higher than the last element temperature, okay, because first element, where was the first element at this point of time? It was an unburnt gas. It was an unburnt gas packet. Okay, so that unburnt gas packet. So, you are talking about the last element, right? So, it keeps on rising in temperature. Why? Heat transfer is one, but more importantly, it is getting compressed. Okay.
So, what does mean first and last element?
X equal to 0 is the first element to burn. We are saying when we give the spark, okay, when we are giving the sparks, unburnt, some fluid packet is burning, okay, element of fluid is burning. So, we call that x equal to 0. Of course, the entire unburnt mass is not burning at the same time, not possible, because there is a flame propagation process taking place. So, we call, let me just explain this one and then. So, what I am saying is, when you give a spark, then something here burns, right, and the last element to burn will be some packet here. So, I am identified something here at x as x equal to 0 and something here at x equal to 1. All of it of course cannot burn at the same time. If all of it burnt at the same time, we would have called it a non-flame mode of combustion, we would have called it more like an explosion, but this is flame propagation. So, it will burn sequentially, one packet burns and the next packet burns and things like that. You can't see this. If you tell me how big is that packet, it is very hard for me to answer. It is an elemental mass which is burning. Okay. So, conceptually this is what we can think of. Yeah.
The pressure is uniform throughout in the burnt and unburnt parts. Then should there be a significant difference between the temperatures, at least by seeing from the equation of state?
Yeah. So, the difference in temperature between unburnt and burnt is because the heat has been already released in the burnt mixture. That is the reason, because combustion has already taken place. So, his question is, if the pressure is all uniform, then why is it that the burnt temperature and the unburnt temperature differ? So, that is because the unburnt is still unreacted, its chemical energy has not been released, whereas in the burnt it has been released, and who is carrying that energy? The burnt gases. So, it is already hot. So, if you have octane, let us say isooctane burning. So, isooctane vapor has been mixed with air and then that is burning, and it is producing CO2, H2O, then carbon monoxide, then all sorts of other radicals, and it has got nitrogen also. Nitrogen is important. It has all picked up that heat. The energy, the chemical energy which was locked up in the fuel has been released and that has been picked up. Okay. So, we are talking about that sort of increase in temperature, but we are also talking about post combustion rise in temperature because of compression. The first element got burnt. If it burns, its temperature will increase, but it also got pressurized, it also got compressed. So, that is why this one at x equal to 0, it probably burned somewhere over here, but its temperature kept on increasing. It is already burned, it has got the energy which was locked up in the fuel, it has been released, but its temperature still goes up because of compression. So, the one which burns first had an opportunity to get adequately compressed. The one which is burning last, it did not have that opportunity. Why? Because its pressure is already going down. The one which burns last, that point of time the piston is already coming down and the pressure has started coming down. Remember the P theta diagram? P theta told you that after a point, okay, maybe we can see both of these together, this will be better. Yeah. So, the pressure is coming down now. So, the last element was unburnt up to this, then it got burnt, its temperature increased because of chemical heat release, because of chemical energy released in the form of heat, and so it has reached some temperature, but then that pressure is coming down now. So, it cannot further increase, whereas when the first element got burnt, it could actually still get raised in its temperature. But these are all calculations, TB and TU are all calculations. It is not like it is not really very easy to do this sort of thing experimentally. It is more conceptual and more like theory, but it is expected to be correct. If you have an engine, measuring temperature inside the engine cylinder is of course not going to be easy. There are optical engines, there are methods in which you can do that, but even there separating the first element from the last element and giving all this will be a huge amount of work. So, these are calculations. All right. So, we were discussing all this in the context of nitric oxide, and so let us go to nitric oxide. So, it is NO parts per million plotted as a function of Crank angle. And again plotted for x equal to 0 element and plotted for x equal to 1 element. So, the first element to burn and the last element to burn. So, you will see solid lines, two solid lines here, but there are two dashed lines also. So, how do we get the solid lines, how do we get the dashed lines? The solid lines say rate controlled, the dashed lines say equilibrium. So, we have some idea of what these possibly can be. Equilibrium means that you have done some equilibrium calculation to get the NO concentrations. That is what the interpretation can be, isn't it? We know how to do equilibrium calculations. So, maybe somebody has done equilibrium calculations and done it for various Crank angles to generate these two dashed lines. What about the solid lines? Solid lines are called rate controlled. Rate of what? Rate of chemical reaction. Okay. So, how do we calculate that? We know that already, that is ddt of NO expression, assuming n atom to be in steady state. So, that means all these calculations are done assuming only one reaction mechanism for nitric oxide production, which is Zeldovich mechanism. This is only with the help of Zeldovich mechanism, not with some other mechanism. In engines, it is predominantly Zeldovich, okay, in most of the operating situations, operating conditions. So, this is Zeldovich, and we can do calculation of NO as a function of time from our equations. Can we? So, to get NO as a function of time, what do we need? We need an expression for ddt of concentration of NO. Do we have that? Did we get it some time back? Yes, we did. We did that, and that expression was not really complicated because we made that steady state approximation for n atom concentration. That was not bad. So, all that one has to do is integrate ddt of NO expression with respect to time, and time can be translated to Crank angle. Time can be related to Crank angle if you know the engine parameters, not a difficult thing to do. So, this will give you those two solid lines which are rate controlled. So, this plot which we are looking at, it is making a comparison, it is giving you a comparison between equilibrium calculations and chemical kinetics calculations. Rate controlled means the chemical kinetics calculations, and you see that there is a fair bit of difference, but with equilibrium you still get some estimate. That is all can be said. Equilibrium is not perfect, but you can still get some estimate. Now, the x equal to 0 line, solid line or the equilibrium line, whichever you choose, is giving you higher value of NO compared to the last element NO. The last element NO is the solid line and the dashed line for x equal to 1, correct? So, why is it that the first element NO is higher? Temperature is higher. We saw that already because we just looked at the temperature plots in the previous plot. So, we are not doing calculations, somebody else has done these calculations. In fact, these all three plots are taken from a book by Ferguson and Kirkpatrick, which is titled Internal Combustion Engines. This is the second edition, it is a John Wiley publication. So, I am using these plots from there. It is there in some other IC engine textbooks also. For example, I think it is there also in Haywood's Internal Combustion Engines book. Some of you may be familiar with this. Okay, so somebody else has done these calculations, but we can still figure out what these people must have done, right? And physically, are we comfortable with all the trends? We understand pressure versus theta. I think we also understand that burnt mass fraction should go from 0 to 1, first plot. Second plot, I explained why x equal to 0 temperature and x equal to 1 temperature of the first element and temperature of the last element, how that comparison should be, and why the x equal to 0 element will have higher temperatures. So, you understand that. So, if you have understood those, then we understand why the NO of the first element will be higher than the NO of the last element. Okay. The other point is that is kind of, I mean, equilibrium calculation is not perfect. So, it has some difference with the chemical kinetics calculations, but actually since the equilibrium values over long time, I mean when the crank angle increases, equilibrium values are low. So, the x equal to 0 solid line also tries to go down a little bit. So, what I am saying is this is x equal to 0 equilibrium calculation, this is x equal to 0 rate controlled calculations. So, these two become comparable in the sense that the rate control thing is also slightly coming down, trying to match the equilibrium values. It does not really happen in the crank angle range that you see, okay, but there is a tendency to equilibrate, not very prominent, but there is a tendency to equilibrate. Similarly, here this dashed line which is equilibrium for x equal to 1 and this solid line which is chemical kinetics for x equal to 1, they also tend to kind of match, but tend to approach, but they do not match very well, because they kind of plateau off. They tend to reach some kind of saturated values. Okay. So, we understand this part, and then finally how do we get NO from the engine? For different elements we can do these calculations, and we can do similar calculations for x equal to 0.5, x equal to 0.7, 0.3, whatever we want, and we can integrate this for the entire time that is available in the engine for all these elements and add contributions of individual elements to get the total NO which will come out of the engine. So, x equal to 0, x equal to 0.3, 0.5, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 1, everything we can integrate and add, and then we can get an estimate of NO that you will get from the engine. Okay. But I thought this is not necessary in our course. This, if you are doing an IC engine course, you will learn this better. But the purpose of all this discussion was to tell you that now we have some feel of how NO gets produced and what are the important mechanisms and what factors will affect them, even for a practical combustion device. So, we will next go to oxidation of alkanes. So, we will not discuss methane as such. Methane is methane mechanism is a little different from other alkanes. So, we will not discuss methane, but we will discuss general scheme of oxidation for these kinds of compounds. For this, so these are called higher paraffins. Now, let us think about how to tackle all this. Now, what have we seen so far when it comes to chemical mechanisms? We saw that hydrogen oxygen mechanism. Now, there were many reactions here, but still manageable, not very high. Okay. Then we looked at carbon monoxide oxidation. That of course is simple. All that you have to remember there is that if you use just dry oxygen or dry air, it is not going to get oxidized properly. There has to be some moisture or some hydrogen containing species, and the main reaction is between CO and OH. OH is the main thing that oxidizes CO. So, if you remember this much, it is not very hard. Nitrogen oxide, we looked at 4 different mechanisms, and we have understood some aspects of those. You do not have to remember those as such, but I think by now you already probably remember what the Zeldovich mechanism is. Okay. And you know that Zeldovich has a competitor in intermediate nitrous oxide mechanism. So, if Zeldovich is O plus N2, intermediate nitrous oxide is O plus N2 plus M. So, that way using these tricks you can remember some of these things also. I am not expecting that you will remember everything, especially the Fenimore mechanism, which is for Fenimore or prompt mechanism, which is for rich combustion. If you ask me to write all those steps, I will not be able to do, and there is no point also. So, you know which page of the book this has, and you go there and then you figure this out, and you have to know that okay, if it is rich combustion, I should not forget the Fenimore mechanism. This is the way we work. We do not try to remember everything, that is not practical. But these were still all said and done. Carbon monoxide, nitric oxide, all these were easier. Now we are getting into hydrocarbon combustion. So, this will be much more complicated, many more steps. And what I also recommend is that you look up Stephen Turns's book or any other combustion book to see a detailed methane combustion mechanism. Just see, just have a look. Okay. This is not a homework assignment as such, but please have a look to see the enormity of the reaction mechanism. Hundreds of reactions, so many species, very complicated. Okay, but we are not going to do all that. We are just going to do some analysis of possible major steps when CnH2n plus 2 burns. Okay, so let's look at this. So these are we're just looking at some broad steps, not individual reactions always. Some individual reactions, but overall broad steps. So even though there may be hundreds of reactions, we can think of some major steps. So again, propane doesn't burn by propane reacting directly with oxygen. Doesn't happen that way. Correct? That's an overall balance. That's not a chemical reaction. So the chemical reaction happens this way, that under suitable conditions, maybe high temperature, whatever, C3H8 has this collision partner M, a third body, which helps it break down into C2H5 and CH3 plus M. Okay, so this is an example of C3H8. If there is some other hydrocarbon, there will be some other reaction, but some breakage of this CC bond, carbon-carbon bond. Some breakage of the carbon-carbon bond. Then there is a hydrogen atom abstraction reaction, which is step 2. Step 2. So the first step we got C2H5 and CH3. And the second step you get some more radicals. So the hydrogen comes out. So that's why it's called hydrogen atom abstraction reaction. So the first one, step 1 was breakage of CC bond. Step 2 was hydrogen atom abstraction. Hydrogen atom comes out. Step 3, there are many reactions, there can be many reactions, but in step 3 there is a development of radical pool. H plus O2 gives you O plus OH. So it's okay if you are not being able to write. I'll just go to the next few steps. Right, so there is a step 4 which looks like this. First step, the carbon-carbon bond broke. Second step, hydrogen atom came out. Third, radicals started developing. H plus O2 giving you O plus OH. And once you have the radical pool, then C3H8 is also attacked by these radicals. So you understand that this radical pool can also attack nitrogen, and it can start the nitric oxide mechanism also, because you need O plus N2 there. So that O can come from this radical pool. And again, what I suggest is, please don't write everything. Maybe just to remember, you can write one of the 3. That is sufficient. Leave space so that you can write other reactions later on. Then there's a step 5. This is also hydrogen atom abstraction. So C3H7, which got formed in the previous step, can now break down into C3H6 plus H. So this breaking down takes place by what is known as a beta scission rule. Now, what is beta scission? Let us say C3H7. C3H7 is, let us say, this structure, or it can be this structure also. Both are C3H7. Both are C3H7. Okay. So, it is a radical because it has got unpaired electron somewhere. Radical means it will have some unpaired electron, some dangling bonds. So, somewhere place has not been filled up. Okay, if you place one H here, then it becomes C3H8, but there is no H. So, this place is the radical site. So, in this isopropyl radical and N-propyl radical, both are C3H7, the radical site is here or the radical site is here. Correct? So, both are possible. Now, the beta scission rule says that the breakage of the CC bond or the CH bond will take place one step removed from the site of the radical. Okay. So, what do we mean by that? This is where you have the radical site. So, the CC bond here, the CH bond here or the CC bond here, these will not break. So, what will break is one step away from that. So, it means this can break, or maybe this could have broken or this could have broken. So, one step away from the radical site. Similarly, here this is where the radical site is. So, these will not break. So, it will break from here. Anyway, I think even if you do not know the beta scission rule, it is fine. Just since I mentioned beta scission rule, I thought of telling you this. We do not need to learn this in this level of intricacy. So, this should be fine for us. And there are a few more steps to come, but I think we will stop here. Very quickly, step 1 is breakage of carbon-carbon bond, step 2 is hydrogen atom abstraction, step 3 was build up of that radical pool, because hydrogen atom came out, that will help develop other radicals like O and OH, and then all these radicals will start attacking the hydrocarbon, which is C3H8 in this example. After that, C3H7 gets formed, and C3H7 now loses hydrogen by this beta scission rule, that is hydrogen abstraction. So, we got only part of the story, but we ran out of time. So, we will do this on Monday. All right. So, thank you.